Check, check, check.
Okay. If you just click on that present button right there, click that. There you go. Yep.
All right, well, I'm going to introduce to you Jennifer Modeen, and actually, I met her in
Seventh,
when did you come?
sixth grade, seventh grade.
You were in seventh grade?
Yeah, you were in eighth.
I was in eighth grade. She was in seventh grade, and she started at Senior Park in Eastern Florida. I think we met on volleyball practice
Yep.
or something like that. And I haven't talked to this woman probably in 20 some years, but I've seen her on TV. It's a different her name coming up as being this wonderful, wonderful resource, this wonderful person within the Grand Forks School District. And as you can see, she's got like 8 zillion titles. The homeless liaison, the Grand Forks Public Schools foster care liaison, Grand Forks Public Schools school social worker, and she's also the Northeast Human Service Center and the partner case manager. Okay. The questions that you submitted before, I have
Really good.
them out.
Yep.
And so she can address that. But I really encourage you to really focus in, take notes if you need to, but make sure we're focusing on Jennifer and ask questions throughout. And with that, let's welcome her to our class.
Good to be here. I really want this to be, a really free-flowing sort of dialogue, not me lecturing to you where you're bored and you're checking your Snapchat or whatever, but more about how we talk together about these things so you can come to understand the subjects. The questions that you had were super thoughtful questions, and so I want to get to those. And I'm going to try to weave those into the dialogue, but mostly I want you to just in the middle, ask a question. I'm assuming that a lot of this information around these kinds of subjects are going to be new to you. So you might have some kind of idea about what kids experience who are in foster care or kids who are experiencing homelessness, but probably very little about what that looks like in the day-to-day regarding a child's development, regarding trauma, regarding accessing education, those kinds of things. So we'll cover all of that today, and then we can talk about the questions you have throughout the discussion, and then after, of course. I won't go over time. I never keep people past, so that's why I was asking Laura to make sure, because I know how important your time is, and it's really annoying when people go over, okay? But I get really passionate about the subject because I care a lot about kids. So I need someone to keep me okay, time's up, okay? So a little bit about myself. So as Laura mentioned, I am a school social worker for the Grand Forks Public Schools. I was born and raised in Grand Forks, North Dakota, moved away, got my 4-year degree in social work at the College of St. Benedict. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. You see it on your way to the cities. Okay. And then I spent 3 years in inner city Chicago after that, working as the first year was as a volunteer, and then after that was a paid position, working for an organization called Boys Hope, Girls Hope. And what Boys Hope, Girls Hope is a nonprofit organization that served children who were highly involved in gang violence, a lot of poverty, coming from the Chicago public school system, that pretty bad conditions, not a lot of safety. And if they were referred to that program, they received a scholarship to be removed from the neighborhood, lived in a house with me. I had 8 adolescent boys, ages 12 to 18, and then they went to they went to a place called Loyola Academy, which is one of the best public schools in the United States, and that was paid for 100%. And then if they continued that, we paid for their college. So it was really it was a scholarship program for inner city youth that didn't have access to a lot of the same kinds of education that you and I would have. That was a life-changing experience for me because I didn't intend on doing school social work. I didn't intend on working with adolescents. College degree, thought I was going to work with adults mentally ill, and went to Chicago, completely changed my trajectory of what I decided to do with the rest of my life. After a couple of years there working with boys, I started the girls program called Girls Hope. Same idea, but working with inner city girls. Moved back to Grand Forks. I know you're wondering why, but yes, I did. I had a very sick father at the time, and that's why I moved home. Otherwise, I would have never come back here. Anyway, started working at juvenile detention. spent a couple years working in juvenile detention as a detention officer here in Grand Forks. And then I moved on to Ruth Myers Adolescent Treatment Center. Any of you familiar with Ruth Myers Adolescent? It's a psychiatric residential treatment for adolescents here in Grand Forks, located behind Italian Moon. Kind of looks like a funeral home. It's a flat building. Learned a lot about myself, about children who have experienced a lot of trauma. I learned a lot about family systems. I learned a lot about kids who are suicidal. I had a child death by suicide while I worked there. A lot of things happened that really formed me as a social worker and built a lot of experience with a lot of kinds of tough things. And then after that, I applied for and was hired at Sacred Heart High School, our alma mater. But I did K through 12 work there as a social worker. So in the Grand Forks Public Schools, we'll talk a little bit about our model, but we are either have an elementary, middle, or high school social worker. So I did K-12 work there. So at the elementary schools, I was doing much more on a conflict resolution, giving kids social skills, that kinds of things. And at the high school level, I was doing more crisis counseling, helping people through, sexual assaults, things like that. And then after that, I decided to go back to graduate school. So this whole time, I just had my undergrad. Went back to University of North Dakota, worked on the crisis team here at UND while I got my graduate degree. Saw a lot of things that I didn't know about students, about culture here, about drinking, about sexual assault, about rape, that I didn't know. I was a young, not that yet, I'm 30-something, but my husband was deployed to Iraq at the time. So he was gone the 2 years I was in graduate school while I was working at the crisis team. So I learned a lot about kind of perseverance and pushing through sort of higher ed kinds of goals at that time. And then I applied for and was offered a position in the Grand Forks Public Schools, which is where I've been for the last 10 years. My time in the Grand Forks Public Schools has been very interesting because it's evolved into the position I have right now. So, children experiencing homelessness. I just want to, if you could just push that. This is, you know what? I'm gonna play a little bit of it for you. Just ignore the cheesy music because that's not the purpose of the video. Go ahead and play it, and then I'll tell you when to stop. This is kind of a really accurate picture of kids who are experiencing homelessness. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah. The most important thing is I want you to hear what they have to say.
Your grandma's not paying nothing, and I don't have the money for it, and I'm not working right now since I just had a baby, so it's hard like that. And it's like you might have to go to a homeless shelter, and I don't really know what they would to exactly how to do that.
this guy that we know, he's a friend of my mom, and so far, I was supposed to go down to the Chili's, and my mom didn't show up, and the cop found me and brought me back here. I was kind of going from school, and there was two cops on our porch. She was like, "Is there a way that we can get inside your house?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I don't know." I turned them out and I opened the door and we went in. And then my mom came home and was like, "What was going on?" And then they said that the house wasn't good enough for us to live in, especially because my mom has 8 kids, and we shouldn't be living in a kind of house like that anyway because the roof wasn't fixed right. We've been in here for almost a year now, and we got here because of Ivan. We had too much mold in the apartment we were living in, and we just couldn't live in there anymore. A landlord or something like that wanted to fix it, so we had to move out.
Okay, you can pause it. Just pause it. Because I don't have time to show the whole thing. Thoughts on that? Do you think we have kids like that in Grand Forks? Yeah, we do. Where are they at? You know, like when you think about people that are experiencing homelessness, you sort of think about, just hit the next slide for me or just close that out. You kind of think about old ladies in shopping carts that are experiencing mental illness, and that's kind of what we think about when we think about people experiencing homelessness. Like they're literally on the street, right? So where do you think the families or the children that are in our Grand Forks Public Schools, where do you think they are? Anybody have any idea? You don't see them on the street when you go down and have a couple drinks downtown. Do you see? I mean, you might see some guys, older guys from the mission, but do you see 9, 10-year-olds on the street? No. So where are they, do you think? If they're homeless, where do you think they're at? Shelter, good idea. So we have one shelter in Grand Forks for women and children. It's located on the north end across from CNR Cleaners, but that's one, and it's always full. Okay? So CVIC, we hear a lot about CVIC and the services they provide. You have to be experiencing domestic violence for you and your children to stay there. So if there's no domestic violence that's present, you can't access that shelter, right? And then the mission, which everybody talks about as our homeless shelter, which it is, a homeless shelter that is only for single people. There are no children allowed there. All right, so what if this shelter's full? Then where do you think they go? Anybody have any idea? Churches, good, very good. In Fargo, they have, has anyone heard of Churches United? So it's a group of churches that open up, yes, they open up their, like church basements, vestibules, things like that, so people have a place to go at night. We don't have that. We have churches that support financially for emergency situations, but we don't have a place like that. Anybody else? The vast majority of kids experiencing homelessness across the nation, there's 1.3 children in our educational system that are homeless across the United States. There's 250 in the Grand Forks Public Schools last year, which is a high percentage compared to Fargo, which has less homeless students and double the amount of population. We have roughly 7,500 students total in the Grand Forks Public Schools. The vast majority of those are what's considered doubled up. So you're my friend, you're in an apartment, and he loses housing. I say, you can come stay with me with your 3 kids. So they might be on the kitchen floor, they might be with a mattress, they might not have a mattress, and so they're doubled up. Now, why is that homeless? There's a roof over their head. It's homeless because it lacks stability and adequate shelter. So the fact that, you know, I can tell him, you got to go. Like, your kids are driving me nuts. Like, you're out of here, dude. Not on the lease, and that happens all the time. So there's that instability, and they're there for economic reasons. That's the criteria. So the Department of Education has a different criteria than the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that's a big issue for me, because we're building a brand new, you may or may not be aware of, we're building a brand new unit called Housing First Unit in Grand Forks right behind the police department that will only serve single people. that will not serve children. And I guarantee you there's more kids that are homeless in this community than there are adults. Guaranteed. But it's getting those folks on the radar, and you can also imagine that many times there is a lot of fear involved with sharing their status with me. People believe that child protection has to get involved. That is not the case. Because you lose your housing does not mean that you are not a good parent, that you not love your children. So the in and of itself, because you're experiencing homelessness, does not prompt me as a mandated reporter to do anything. So what the Department of Education has adopted is called the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So this is what matters to you as a human being. It doesn't matter what your major is, because what we know about these kids across the nation is that they do not achieve at very high levels. Why do they not achieve at very high levels? Well, is it because all kids who are experiencing homelessness are not intelligent? Absolutely not. And we'll get into foster care. 3% of children who interact with our foster care system go to college. 3%. That is scary. That is a very scary statistic. And why is that happening? And what can we do about it? It's not, you can't say that 97% of the kids who interact with the foster care system don't have the wherewithal, desire, or intellect to obtain a four-year degree. That would be garbage. Okay. So McKinney-Vento has I have 5 here, but 5 main themes. Identifying people who are experiencing homelessness, working on school stability, getting them enrolled. Big issue for unaccompanied homeless youth. Unaccompanied homeless youth is a youth who is accessing education at the high school, middle school, who is not under the care of a parent or guardian. So you're 17 years old, you're not under the care of a parent or guardian. There could be a lot of reasons for that. There could be abuse, there could be neglect, there could be sex, there could be drugs, whatever. No matter what, you're accessing our district, we have to let you come into school. A lot of people don't know that. So that's that enrollment. Support for academic success. So because there's all these things that are happening, do we just drop kids in high school and say, well, we got you in the door, good luck, hope you can get to school and figure it out. You have no money, you have nowhere to stay. And then best interest determination. So that's where, as a district, when we have these kids and people are moving around and all this stuff, how do we determine what's in the child's best interest? Now remember, it's not what's in the school's best interest. It's not what's in the social worker's best interest. It's what's in the child's best interest. That's a difficult thing to think about. So I gave you this. This is old. This is our current. I left this. It's still 38% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that would be considered your students that are in poverty. So a regular lunch would be like 2 something. They get it for free. And then if you're on reduced, you get it for like 50 cents. Okay. And I have our 17-18 statistics there. We have about 250 students, and then we have a number of unaccompanied homeless youth. Nationwide, the federal government estimates at 13%. Can you play this for me? Now this is a I think you guys will like this. I'm not going to say too much about it. Sorry, just give us a minute to skip that. That's okay. That's okay. You just have to let it. You can say skip ad in like 2 seconds. Really? Okay. Can you turn it up a little bit? Just to, perfect.
I think the biggest thing with Jaime was a kid that everything in life had been an uphill challenge. He just needed a break. When Jaime was little, his father walked out on him, his mom, and his sister in Washington State, where his mother struggled to provide. Sometimes he would have a bar and we would camp out on that for a while. They were home. Yeah. In high school, sports kept him off the streets. Soon enough, he learned his mother was dying of cancer.
Great mother, I was like with you and a protector.
Jaime arrived on campus with a hot head and a huge chip on his shoulder.
I have some garbage cans that got their asses kicked because of Jaime Miranda.
Jaime also learned B's in high school mean little in college.
How hard is college? Tremendously hard. Every semester I think about leaving.
I've already told him point blank, quitting is just not an option for you. I'm never going to give up on you. Central College is never going to give up on you, nor can you give up on yourself.
Jaime sought and got help from professors. His teammates and even their parents embraced him too.
Jaime is the biggest success story in my entire life. Jaime means 100 times more to me than anyone else.
He's a co-captain with the team this year. When he graduates in the spring, he wants to work with kids like him.
I live in the same year, there's like a way out, and you're not, your life isn't determined by the circumstances.
And Jaime has learned it helps to have the whole school cheering for him. Harrison, NBC News, Carolina.
So I have a student just like Jaime that contacted me. This is a number of years ago. He was a athlete. He was a state qualifier, and he was homeless. And he, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter why. It's not about blaming people, but for whatever reason, he had been asking for help and he wasn't getting it. And he found my name listed under the Department of Public Instruction. That's like the big, whatever, overseer at education that listed me as a homeless liaison. And he sent me a 3-page email, single space typed, about why he deserved to get some of the access under McKinney-Vento, but most importantly, he needed me to sign off on his college application. Because under one of the things that, if you're experiencing homelessness and you're going off to college, it really wouldn't be right if you had to claim your parents' income if they haven't been caring for you. I mean, really? Your dad's making $80,000 a year, but he kicked you out a year ago. It wouldn't be right. So one of the other things that I do then is I verify that this child was doubled up with a friend and experiencing homelessness, so they could. And there's not like some big balloon for homeless kids like go to college and you'll get free money. I mean, he applied just like everybody else. He did get a Pell Grant, but it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a little bit. He's a junior at the University of North Dakota right now. So some of the things we talk about in identification, again, trying to get away from the term homeless, I say students in transition. When I'm talking with families, a lot of times I talk to them about, tell me about your housing situation. Like, is your housing situation stable? What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is if tomorrow someone said you had to get out, would you have to? Right? Because if you sign a lease and your name's on it, they can't just make you leave. But if you're doubled up with somebody or you're staying with your boyfriend who's abusive and he says, you can take you and your 2 bratty kids, and then that's different, right? You lack housing stability. So the eligibility, this is what I've talked to you a little bit about, is lacking that fixed, regular, and adequate. A lot of people wonder about ages. Like, what if there's a kid who's 18 and he's going to one of our high schools? He's still eligible? Yes, he's still eligible. What really McKinney-Vento does, like I mentioned earlier, is that it really creates that school stability for folks. So if you're accessing one of our high schools and you're experiencing homelessness, and let's say you go double up with a friend of yours, normally you'd have to switch high schools. And they move. This is a problem because they're moving kids around a lot. They were, oh, well, you're at a different elementary school, you have to go to that school. And then the mom would move somewhere else and she'd be in her car for a while, you have to go to this school. Oh, you're at the shelter now, or if you're in high school, you have to move around. So what the law does is it protects from movement like that. So we have this terminology called school of origin. So that's the place where the child laid its head down. That's the school they can attend. Oh, but now there's money attached, because how are we going to get them there? So a lot of people don't understand in Grand Forks, we do not have busing that is free, right? A lot of people, you see buses moving around, but you don't know that people pay for that. So Minnesota, everybody gets bused for free. North Dakota, in Grand Forks, not the case. So we have special ed busing, and then we have busing for our English language learners. The reason we do that is because we send them to a magnet school, which is very, very far from where they live. Everyone else is supposed to be in their neighborhood, so they should be able to walk. That's the theory, but it doesn't work that way when it's 20 below. So one of the big things that we do is we provide transportation, and that's a lot of money, and it makes it really difficult. A little easier with like a middle or high school kid because I can put them on the city bus and I can pay for it. A little bit more difficult when you have an elementary kid because they don't want to ride the city bus by themselves. It's not safe. So like right now I have a kid that is at one of our hotels. They got kicked out and they're in a really scary hotel. And I had to kind of talk with him. This child's 7 years old. And I had to talk with him about, we pulled up and there was a really nice pickup at this really shitty hotel. And so we can imagine what that really nice pickup was doing there because it wasn't like prostitution, I'm sure it was. So you have a 7-year-old kid you're dropping off. You see the guy driving a $50,000 pickup. And, you know, at that point, it's my responsibility as the school social worker to have a little conversation about, don't be talking to that guy. Don't be thinking about even interacting with him. Why? Because he's not safe. He's not a good person. Should a 7-year-old have to deal with that? No. But who's going to protect them from that, right? Are there effects of that on the child in the educational classroom right now today? Absolutely. Absolutely. So we provide transportation. We do the determination of best interest. Here's another thing that is a real problem. Oh boy, gotta go fast. For our unaccompanied youth is they would say, well, we don't have a birth certificate for you. We don't have, how do we know you're not a runaway or all this kind of thing? And of course I vet that process with law enforcement and things like that, but we have to enroll kids even if they don't have like a birth certificate or things like that. Now, does that mean we just blow off those rules? Absolutely not. We're gonna go after that. We just can't keep them sitting in a hotel for, for 3 weeks while we're waiting for a piece of paper, which that has happened, and that's not good, right? This is an unaccompanied youth that I worked with. I'll skip this because we're out of time. Okay, so now I want to talk to you just a little. Anybody have any questions so far? I'm going so fast, but please ask them because I've got your questions and I will. Anybody? Okay, let's talk a little bit about foster care youth. Can you push that for me?
Aaron, take one.
My name is Cody. I'm 14 years old. I was turned 15.
My name is Heidi. I'm 16. My birthday is up. Thank you.
How long have you been in the foster care system?
5, 6 years.
6 years.
What do you need to be foster?
It's really hard. You are 80 years with 12 other boys, and
You mentioned Saturday. I can't see my mom, so I'm getting you.
Not have mom or dad and just feel mentally feel like you have to move around so much?
It's rough. It's not fun.
it makes me afraid when I can't depend on anybody.
Okay, pause.
Being put in a family that
All right, so foster care. I will tell you that the questions that you're asking, which are very, very good, about children who are in foster care. Children who are in foster care, it is not their fault that they are in the system. And they should never be treated like it is. The second most important thing is that every child deserves to be treated with dignity. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what color skin they have. It doesn't matter their sexual orientation. It doesn't matter if they're experiencing the foster care system or homelessness, whatever. Every kid needs people, just like you did when you were in school. So can you think about that teacher that was like a total jerk to you that you hated? I can pull her up. I know what her name is too. 6th grade, Mrs. Cole, piece of work. She embarrassed me all the time. I can also pull up that other person in my life that encouraged me and believed in me and whatever. The thing I want you to understand about these kids is that, and all of us as human beings, we don't do life alone. And to expect these kids to do things alone is just wrong. And say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, figure it out. Well, that's a great analogy, but most of us have a lot of people around us to help us and support us and help us grow. And a lot of these kids don't have that. So one of the questions was, how do we support kids who are experiencing homelessness, whatever? We're there for them. That's what we do. We step into their court and we support them as human beings. They have dreams, they have hopes, they have struggles, just like any other kid. It's super important that that we really advocate for them. What we don't have a lot of time for is the fact that, can you just, next slide for me, is that many times trauma and when bad things happen, things come out really sideways, both in life and in education. So what it might look like, and we think, oh, that kid's just being a jerk, or he's a piece of work, or what's his problem, or doesn't he know by now, whatever. We have to start interacting and understanding and using more of a trauma-sensitive lens about how we're serving these kids. That's the best thing we can do. And a lot of my work that I'm doing now on kind of behavioral interventions, because we have what's called multi-tiered system of supports behavior teams in the schools, is really helping people think about how we best meet the needs of kids who have had situations like this, so that they're treated with dignity and that their dreams can be actualized. So in the Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed last year, there are new provisions, so protections for, guess what, foster kids. So just like those McKinney-Vento protections for homeless children, we now have them for foster care. Well, I wonder why that is. Well, in 2008, there was a law that was passed called Fostering Connections. So that's on like the child welfare side of the house over here. I'm in education over here. That said we really shouldn't be moving foster kids around. We need to stop doing that. Why? Because they're not attaining educationally. If you think about it from, like I say from my perspective, I'm a decent social worker, but if someone tomorrow said, okay, why don't you go work in the Minot Public Schools? Like, you're fine, you're resilient, like you make friends so easy, like you'll be fine. Here's a new briefcase, here's a new computer, go to Minot Public Schools. And then I'm there for like a few months and they say, oh, you know what, we have something better for you in Fargo. Why don't you go to Fargo? You'll be fine. You don't need to have bad attitude, it's gonna be fine. That's what we do to kids all the time. And then we wonder why they start to have maybe adverse experiences. Would you like someone to tell you, like, you need to go? Sorry, you can't be here anymore. So what this protects is we can't always influence where the foster home changes are, but we can influence where the school changes are. So that's that mirroring of the McKinney-Vento law of school stability. Now we do that for foster care youth. This just started. So like last August, all hell broke loose. Why did all hell break loose? Because everyone was trying to move foster kids, and we had trained the district, and so I was telling all the secretaries, wait a minute, no, we're not moving anybody, not yet. We have to do what's called a determination of best interest. What does that do? Well, that slows down the process so we can think about what's in the child's best interest. Not the system, not whatever. And it's not perfect, but what it does is it creates this dialogue between the school and the foster care worker, which is the custodian, to say, hey, can't we look at ways we can keep her in her school of origin, so at least she doesn't have to switch high schools. Like, she's got enough going on. And that has been really significant for kids in our district, because we've really stopped about 70% of the school moves, because we know that school stability is a really important part of long-term success, right? Are you guys familiar why, I just want to go through this really quick, of why, because we have 1 minute, why a child would be placed into the foster care system? I just put these up here. So physical abuse, sexual exploitation, we're seeing a lot more of that now. Negligent treatment, so child neglect or like abandonment. So again, this goes back to treating the child with dignity, because it's not the child's fault. If these things happen, I'm not going to then, quote unquote, punish a child in high school. That would make, or middle school or element, that would make no sense, right? Really wanting to educationally meet the needs of those students. One of the things, this will be my last point, and then we'll open up for questions. One of the good questions was, should we lower our expectations for these kids? Absolutely not. But should we understand them? And should we realize that maybe how it looks from the outside isn't really maybe what's really going on? Maybe there's been adults in their life that they have not been trustworthy. So when you're interacting with them, are they maybe going to treat you differently? Maybe. But over time, building that relationship is going to heal some of that. And there's a whole long thing I could go on about healing the brain and what happens with trauma and how that happens in the context relationships. But the other question was, and I think I answered it here, but what do we do right away if a family or anybody we know is experiencing foster care or homeless? We have about 200 kids in foster care in our district too. We're always just trying to meet the needs. So if it's a homeless family, we're meeting with the family. I'm sitting down and I'm saying, look, I'm here as an advocate for you. I want to support you. We're working, helping them through housing applications, making sure they have medical assistance, making sure they have supplemental nutrition assistance, all that stuff. But really, meeting people where they're at is the first step that we do when we interact. And then what can we do to be helpful to you? And then, of course, there's a piece where I'm meeting with the school team and I'm explaining some of that to help them better understand how to serve that kid, right? Is there question? I think I answered most of them, but there might be a few questions. Do we have like 5 minutes? Yes? 4 minutes? Anybody got anything surprise you? Thoughts? This doesn't make sense. How could this be happening? Or anybody? Yeah.
Kid comes up to us and says, hey, we're homeless. I don't know where to go. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do.
Right.
And you're the instructor or fill in the blank.
All the teachers that are working in our district know exactly if a child says that, or if a family says that, or even if they allude to it, they have them find their school social worker right away. So every school has a social worker. They're not full time, but once you get connected, once the family and the child get connected with us, we're going to take care of them. And we have a whole assessment process that we do, and then we follow them through the whole school year, and we pick them up the next year so that they don't, quote unquote, get lost. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'm elementary. I'm in 2 elementary schools. We have some that share. Everything's shared, so we're never in a place full time. Isn't that interesting? So I was in 3 elementary schools. And then I also do, and I didn't talk to you about this, but the partnership, so I work with severely emotionally disturbed youth. They can be in any building. So I have one at Central, one at Ben Franklin, whatever. And then the middle and high school, they rotate between the 2, and then elementary. So really good question. Your questions are really thoughtful. I hope this was helpful to you. Not too boring, but some kind of fresh ideas. We're also always looking to partner with the university on, if you guys are involved in sororities or if you're involved in any service clubs. We just started a new program with the Red River DECA called Grab and Go, which is a bag for middle and high school students that they can grab a snack or they can grab toiletry items if they can't afford it with no questions asked. It's going to be in something very discreet. So if you were struggling at home, you could swing by, pick it up, and we went in front of the Aerial Sprayers Association. They gave us $3,200 to start, but if you ever want to like help out with things like that, I have my cards up here, and then I also have some just sample brochures if you want to just look at our program. So please reach out if you can ever help. Thanks, you guys.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Yes, definitely. I know she'll have a form.
Yeah, I'll just set them right here. Yeah, I certainly can. It's a lot longer than what you saw. A lot longer. But, I mean, it's got good information on it, and I'm happy to share it with you, so no problem. Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, you can. They're not going to watch the whole video, but if you wanted to.